All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us for our last webinar of the year. Before we jump in, I did want to acknowledge the loss of Bob Post, who is the CEO of Knowland. Bob had such a positive impact on the hospitality industry, and we know his legacy will continue to live on with the great work at Knowland. So Kristi, we are sorry for your loss, and we are thinking about you and the Knowland team.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Before we start, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So we will be recording this webinar. A recording will go out tomorrow morning for everyone who's registered. We will also be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A box and we'll do our best to answer them all within the hour. So today we will be doing a wrap on 2020, discussing what we've learned in the last year. 2020 was a wild ride, to say the least. We are probably all happy it's over. But before we jump in, let's kick it over to the panelists. So we'll start with Amy Infante from GitGo. Amy, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. It's going to be a fun discussion.
No problem. We're glad you could make it today. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and GitGo?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and founder of GitGo. We've been in business for about 15 years now. Our clients are individual hotel properties, management companies, brands, and chains. And we specialize in building new business revenues for our hotel partners. And our primary focus is on the small and mid-sized companies. So we provide data and insights, and our specialty, what we're really known for, is done-for-you services or staffing augmentation. We have a suite of services that's provided for individual hotels and portfolios called GitGo Works. And we also have customized programs for our portfolio brand and chain partners that we kind of provide as a white label service, and that's called GitGo Alliance. So we're really proud of the results that we've been able to provide for our customers during COVID, finding and attracting millions of dollars in new revenues, ensuring they're winning in the market share and remaining profitable in these really difficult times. I've been a loud advocate, as Bob knows, of proactive new business development my entire sales career, which started in my early 20s, always working in markets that did not have loads of inbound lead opportunities. So GitGo really started from that idea, the need hotels had in challenging markets to build a pipeline and see it through. And my purpose at GitGo is to inspire action and illuminate possibilities for our partners, and then walk them through to ensure that they see the results they need to have viable, sustainable, and profitable businesses.
Awesome. And now over to Kristi. Kristi is from Knowland. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself as well as Knowland?
So I'm a 30-year hospitality veteran, which means that I'm older than all of you, but we're going to pretend like I started when I was 12, and I've worked on both sides of the fence. I spent 17 years on the hotel side, either in sales roles, revenue management, operations, so sort of a catch-all kind of thing there. But for the past 13 years, I've actually worked on the vendor side of the world and consulting with hotels to help them make more money. Currently, I'm the vice president of product for Knowland. So most of you probably know Knowland as the reader board company, and my marketing person is on the call, and I'm almost certain, just had a minor stroke. But we're actually ever so much more than that. We've taken all of that data, applied machine learning and some artificial intelligence behind the scenes to create the ultimate prospecting tool. And we help hotels find the accounts most likely to book their hotel. And we want to empower sales teams to be proactive in their approach to group business, because we want to turn every member of your sales team into a hunter. And what's happened over the last 10 years is we've forgotten those sales skills, those hunting skills. So our product helps you rediscover those skills and hone them. And that's what we do.
Awesome. And yeah, Katrina was cringing inside.
I know. She'll hunt me down later. Do not worry. I'm actually surprised that my phone didn't ding with a text.
Perfect. And over to Bob Graham, CEO, my boss of Event Temple. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself as well as Event Temple?
Sure. So yeah, CEO here at Event Temple, co-founder of the company along with my partner, and we specialize in hotel sales and catering software. So that includes event management and that aspect, but also sales prospecting, CRM, relationship management, room blocks, that sort of stuff. Prior to Event Temple, I was in sales for quite a while. During that time, I kind of in the evenings built an event company, which eventually became my full-time job, and I grew that to a national business that I sold. After that, I had a great idea that I'm going to learn how to code, and probably the worst person to try to do that. But during that time, I met my now business partner, who's a much better software engineer than I am. And he said, "Hey, Bob, we should go into business. I'll handle the coding." I think that was his way of getting me out of it.
It's a very polite way to do it too.
Yeah, it is. And I said, okay, well, let's build something for the event industry, but also it has to have sales tools in it. And actually a friend of mine was managing a hotel, and she said, well, I'd love to see that. I don't love what we're using. And we ended up going to meet her in her office, and she would give us feedback, and we'd buy her coffees. And it was just sort of a fun project we became a little bit obsessed with. And as we learned more about the industry, we thought, wow, we can really make an impact here and do things differently. So since that time, flash forward about 5 years, we've been growing very fast. We call it hyper growth because those are the tech words we use now, right? But we have thousands of users in 23 countries today. And
Nice.
And like Kristi and Amy, big focus on prospecting, and something we're passionate about, especially coming out of this year in 2020. We think it's going to be the big thing moving forward that we all need to be thinking about.
Definitely. Well, I feel very fortunate to be with 3 industry experts today. If you follow Amy, Kristi, or Bob on LinkedIn, you'll see that they're in the know of all the latest hospitality trends, as well as influencing how hospitality should be looking into the future. So I'd love to hear what you've seen in regards to travel and hotel sales and events over the last 3 to 6 months. And when you're reflecting back on this year, were there any trends that jumped out that you didn't really expect to see? Kristi, we'll start with you.
Well, I certainly didn't expect COVID. I anticipated some softening this year. Actually had expected about a 3-point drop in occupancy. I think I might have been a bit off on that one. However, joking aside, what I have seen and what I think we'll continue to see is the next generation of hospitality leaders emerging. These are the people who dig in and started hunting for business the minute those small green shoots started coming out back at the beginning of the summer. But on the opposite side of that, I'm also seeing a lot of people who've just sort of given up. We were talking about it before we started the broadcast. And that's not something that I'm accustomed to in our industry. I'm a glass half full kind of gal, so I choose to focus on the future leaders because I think in every economic downturn, and this is my what we've seen is vendors step up and develop something that's leaps and bounds ahead because they have sort of that little lull. You get leaders that step in and find better ways to do things. So I'm beginning to see that coming along with companies that have stepped into that, thrown in some new technology, or has come out with a new product to sort of to step into that fray. And that's what I'm hoping that we're going to see. I think transient is going to be a big piece of our world. And I actually think as blurry as the bleisure line might have been before COVID, I actually think it's going to get a whole lot blurrier as things start to move forward into 2021.
No, totally. And I'd love to hear your perspective about it, Amy.
Yeah, well, I'll agree. I didn't expect COVID, although we were going in. I remember in 2019, we were talking about a softening specifically in the hospitality industry. There was a lot of talk about an economic downturn, and then it changed over to, well, it's probably going to hit hospitality. I don't think anybody could predict as harsh as it has been for us all this year. But I'll also agree, seeing new leadership emerge and new ideas has been really refreshing and fun. I also think, as somebody who has always advocated for proactive and the need for it, what this has done is really shined a spotlight on the need for it. And what I really hope will happen is that we don't forget this when things come back stronger in the future, and that we can continue to do sustainable, proactive new business development in a way that serves the sellers and the clients. And what I mean by serving the sellers is we've got to give them enablement so that we're not just relying on their intuition to remember to reach out and nurture. And so Bob and I have been really passionate and talking a lot over the past year about ways to make that happen inside of sales CRMs and things like that. And that's just something that I see being adopted a little bit more than probably what would have happened when we were, dealing with all the wonderful highs that we had prior. There wasn't a reason, but this created change and an open door, an excuse to allow for this next evolution, both in the leadership area and in the innovation and the design of how we go about doing sales proactively in the future.
Definitely. And when I look back at my years at the hotel before I came to Event Temple, I could say I was coasting a bit. I mean, our inbox was just full of RFPs and it was really easy. Sales was easy. I looked great, but I wasn't doing much prospecting at all. And I was just talking to my boss yesterday and how things have changed so quickly within the past year, and how they are trying to get those sales enablement tools now and get the right training for the team so they can get those sales and be competitive. And Bob, I'd love to hear about you and what you're seeing.
Yes, I think prior to COVID in Event Temple, the sales software piece was almost treated like a storage container, right? So you would have, oh, we've got a group, we've got events, here's the contacts and accounts. We're basically using it for anything we have coming up in the next 30 days, then we're forgetting about it. And if our boss makes us, maybe we'll log some traces, right? And we'll call it a day and run our pace reports. I think now we're seeing sales activity increase in the app. We saw 24% in the tools, the way we built them, right? So we're getting excited in our own system because we're like, yes, that's what you're supposed to use it for, being proactive. And then also just looking at some of the new tools we've developed specifically around prospecting and new workflows and seeing those get embraced by really early adopters. So people hammering us going, hey, we want them out before they're even finished. Like, let us see what you have. So that hunger to get in there and use technology, like Kristi was saying, is big. Also, we're looking at, combining sales and marketing in new ways, right? So I think historically, hotels were prospecting by a lot of drop-ins and cold calls, and it was kind of that old school sales approach, right? And it worked, but it wasn't really linking up prior to there was no before. It was just like, here I am, do you want to book with me? Now we're seeing sort of this alignment between digital marketing and sales, which I haven't seen before. And I think it's kind of the new sales 2.0 for hotels. So this digital nurturing and this digital kind of warming up relationship, so it's never a true cold call. You sort of know them ahead of time and we'll talk about that later. But it's been interesting, and it definitely has felt like we call it, outbound or prospecting has taken on a lot of new interest, especially inside of our software.
And so I think we can all agree that competition is going to be at an all-time high right now for the market share, and hotels are going to be competing with other hotel sizes they never even thought they'd be considered in the same market for. So what kind of tips and tricks can hoteliers do to differentiate themselves from those other properties, as well as what kind of tips do you have for prospecting for business in this new era, kind of post-COVID vaccine time we're going to jump into? Amy, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. I think it's really important to not forget the voice of the customer, to have conversations. One of my mentors coined the term conversations create cash, and I love that. I think we have to not be afraid to engage with people. And I think the hard part, what I've seen, the hotels that struggle with this weren't doing it pre-COVID. And so their questions that they come to me with is, how can I be authentic when I don't know them? And I'm reaching out now in the midst of all this, asking for their business. And so my response to that is, you are not pitching, you are not selling when you're prospecting. You're learning and researching and gathering information so that you can determine if you're the right fit. And I think that there's a way to do that, just as Bob was saying, between the digital and the voice, marrying the two. I think it's really smart, although a lot of hotels don't have the advantage of having this B2B marketing entity on their team. They don't have that support. And so making sure that they utilize the technology to enable them to have that setup that they need, the nurture cadence, the frequency that's needed to reach out. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is relevance to the customer. What's compelling to them? What's going to break through the noise? Because they still have a lot of noise. Yes, we've seen actually that voice and conversation is just as great as it's always been. Clients are willing to have a conversation. It's maybe even stronger. We've had better connections with clients over this when you're able to just, be human and have just a casual, hey, let's get to know each other. There's maybe a little bit more space for that today than there ever has been. And so I say to salespeople, use that to your advantage. In my conversations with salespeople all over the country and all over the world, in fact, one of the things that they say is they love getting back to building relationships and not being as transactional as it's felt over the last several years. And so I encourage them then to not hesitate to reach out and engage with potential customers and just change the story from I have to pitch because this customer, I need to get their business, what can I get, to how can I give, how can I add value to the conversation so that when the time is right, I'm the first call.
Definitely. And I think David just said this to the panelists, but if you're not a hunter, you won't survive this time. And I think it's so right. You have to embrace that hunter kind of mentality, but with a little bit of softness as well. And Kristi, what are you seeing right now?
So I'm going to take a slightly different slant on this. Answer the phone. We're having conversations. We just finished a big survey with Conference Direct, and meeting planners can't get a salesperson on the phone. So they're not even booking at places they might have a relationship. They're booking at the hotels that someone is there to physically answer the phone and can actually transact the business. A lot of hotels, especially the smaller hotels, they may still have their director of sales, if they still even have one still that's not on furlough, working a desk shift. There has got to be someone there 4 or 5 days a week that during business hours that can conduct those transactions, because if they don't, those meetings are occurring. We see it in our data every week. We're seeing 15 to 20% increase in meetings week over week in the markets that we're reading. So those meetings are out there. They're smaller, and these are probably being booked by Susie at the local office, not Janet at the corporate office. So you've got to have those local relationships. And to Amy's point, you absolutely can develop them, because guess what? Some of these people are working at home, and I know I've been working at home since March, and it's me, my husband, and my son in the house. I'm happy to talk to anyone that's not those two people, and we'll carry on a conversation. And we're feeling it when we talk to customers as well. They're just happy to talk to another warm body. But then the other thing, and I'm going to kind of build on what Amy said, is we have to stop looking at business as a transaction. It's not the only meeting that or group that company has. Asking those further questions. What other events do you plan? How frequently are you coming to the market? Is San Antonio the only market that you meet in, or do you move around? Understanding that, whether it's from buying a product like Knowland, where you can see that information so that you can warm up those phone calls, or creating those things. What we've done in the last 10 years, because we were so busy filling out those RFPs, is that we looked at things as a one-time piece of business. If you ever take that step back and lose that myopia, what you discover is that one-time piece of business that you didn't give your best lead because it was the second week of March and that's the busiest week of the year for you guys, and you just couldn't take it, is actually a $150,000 piece of business across the year. And that 1 week is the only time that's bad for you. All the rest of them are need periods. And that's part of what good hunters can do, is understand the holistic nature of an account and not look at it as a transactional hit it and quit it piece of business.
Definitely. And I think it is like making those little sacrifices to see the long-term plan, rather than being very focused on just that little piece of business.
Well, and I say this as a revenue manager, a trained revenue manager. If you came to me on a week that was going to be busy and said, it's not about this one-time piece of business, they actually have meetings this week, and this week, which we traditionally struggle in, I'm going to quote that differently, knowing I got a dog in the hunt on those other events. But if you come at me with one-time event, it's going to be like, you're cute, go away. Just run along now. And that's where that sort of antagonistic relationship between sales and revenue management often comes from, because you're coming at us transactionally, not holistically. And I think that's going to be probably more important than anything from a prospecting perspective, because guess what, guys? Q1 is looking a little soft right now. I looked at the travel click numbers yesterday from a group perspective. Q2 and Q3 are already looking very, very strong. And we're seeing that in the survey that we just did with Conference Direct as well. That's when they're booking. So it's out there. Get on the phone, answer your phone.
I love that. No, I love that. And I've seen that look from a revenue manager before. And Bob, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to echo what Kristi was saying too there of answering the phone. I wish every hotel had a chat bot on it right now too, because I have more questions than ever, right? Because I want to know if I'm going to go to a hotel, like, am I allowed to have a meeting there? How many people? What protocols do you have? What about that? You know, there's new questions and you have to get through those before you'd even consider booking. And we saw terrible response times. One thing we talked to our customers, prospects about a lot are like, you want to get back to people quickly. I'm saying pre-COVID, one time I tried to book a meeting for our own company for a quarterly retreat and they took 10 days to get back to me. I'm like, we booked this thing 10 days ago, you know, like, so it's interesting. There's still business out there. So I think just being ready to answer those new questions is critical. Also, I was kind of laughing inside when you're talking about sales and revenue management, because being in sales for so long, you instinctively know that your job almost seems too fun to an outsider because you're just talking to people and checking in on them. And it's almost like you're just being paid to call and meet up with your friends. But
well, let's be honest, that's all it is. Let's just be honest.
You know, but if you're a great salesperson, that is what you're doing. And they like you, so they're going to keep booking with you. Right. And, but sometimes articulating that is really tough to do to management or someone on a more analytical role. So we've been trying to, you know, bring that out in our software of like, how can you show the playbook? Because when you say relationship management, people don't know what that means, right? But if you say, oh, well, I check in and here's why, and here's the results it leads to, and you can never codify your personality in your relationship, but you can show the inputs that lead to those outputs. And I think that that's really valuable for salespeople to do right now, because now management can see like, oh, if I do X, I get Y, so I'm going to reinvest. And it's not as ethereal and, you know.
Exactly. Tangible. We had right at the beginning, we were doing a webinar series, and one of the participants said that to stay in touch with his contacts. And this guy is a true hunter. You know it. The minute I tell you the story, you know it. He went to the hotel that was closed and took 2 cases of toilet paper. So think about, we couldn't find toilet paper at the beginning of all of this. And then he mailed one of those sealed rolls to every one of his top customers with a little personal note that says, we've got you covered. And he had more of his top accounts that called him, just to laugh, because they're like, hey, you got me to laugh in the midst of all of this. And this is just the funniest tongue-in-cheek, we're all in this together moment. And if that's not the height of personal sales, you know, service, I don't honestly know what is. And I have a feeling when that hotel opened, the minute meetings started happening, he couldn't answer the phone quick enough.
100%. It's a service piece too, being a good salesperson, right? To say like, hey, if you want to text me, you need something, I'm going to be there, right? You don't have that with other properties. You have that with me. I think those things are increasingly important too during this time, because people want to feel cared about.
Yeah. Another thing I would add, I say this because I've actually been traveling over the last 3 or 4 months, is, you know, everybody's behind a mask right now. So you can't see the smile. And there are people who smile and you can't see it in their eyes. But I've stayed in 2 hotels in the past 6 weeks. Neither one of them, well, one of them didn't have their restaurant anything open. The last time I stayed in it, no one said a word to me. I walked up and said, my name's Kristi White. I have a reservation. She took my ID, handed me back my keys, and then pointed in the direction of the elevators. No words were exchanged. And then the last time I stayed, I asked at check-in, I had moved hotels because had been told their restaurant was open, asked the front desk person, is the restaurant open? Apparently she thought that meant, is it open right now? And said, no, it's closed. As I'm checking out 3 days later, I'm looking at a piece of paper that wasn't on the desk when I checked in that said the coffee shop is open from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. for grab and go breakfast. And the bar is open from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. for room service meals. So they missed out on 3 breakfasts and 2 dinners because the desk clerk either misinterpreted and she was friendlier than the last hotel, either misinterpreted my question or just didn't care. And I think we're going to have to kind of go out of our way to be hospitable because of the plexiglass that's in front of us, the mask that covers our face, going back to our roots of we're a service industry.
100%. And
Something.
Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Bob. I was just going to say, I think that it comes back to something that you said earlier around being authentic, but also we have such an opportunity as salespeople to be trusted advisors right now because there's so much confusion in understanding, this market is really locked down. There's other markets that are more open. And you have to be sharing the situation in your market with your customers, and especially because it's constantly changing. And so that gives a wide open door to share relevant information with customers. I don't think we've ever had an opportunity that's been more relevant and timely to start to share those things. I think in the past, hoteliers were almost like, everybody else offers the same thing that I offer, right? How can you differentiate your hotel? How can you differentiate yourself? And I think right now there's just such a wide open opportunity to differentiate and to be a trusted advisor and sharing relevant content and information.
Yeah, Amy, I was going to say there was a comment that we got here just saying, also acknowledging all the different jobs that, one individual may now have to do at the hotel, like working front desk, maybe even some housekeeping support, banquet support, and somehow responding quickly. That may be unrealistic because they're being pulled so many different ways because there's less people on staff. But I just wanted to highlight that to say, I do feel like that's what technology is for, right? So
right.
With tech, what we look to do is, I would never tell a salesperson if they have good relationships to change something they're doing. If it's working, keep doing it. All I think we do at Event Temple is free them up to do more of that. So looking at how can I respond quickly in a personalized way that doesn't seem automated, but maybe is, and then flags it so that I can get back to it when I have a minute. So they have that response time, but it doesn't have to be me. And looking at those areas so that you can spend more time doing what you have to do physically or in person.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll add to this. My husband is a GM at a very small hotel. It's only 140 rooms. And he is today's Wednesday, Tuesday. He's working 7 to 3 this morning and will work 7 to 3 every day for probably the next 8 days. And his director of sales is still on furlough, but he makes a point every week that he calls 10 of their customers just to touch in. Hey, how are things going? What's going on? And, he's that one that's answering the phone and running towels to a room and all that. So while I appreciate that everyone is stretched thin, I think every company in the world is saying that right now. You can still, if you've got to work a shift, from 7 to 12, you work the shift, maybe someone comes in a little earlier to relieve you and you spend a couple of hours dedicated to returning phone calls. I don't think it needs to be instantaneous, but if everything that's booking, the travel click numbers, Amadeus numbers support it, everything is booking inside of 30 days. 90% of all business is booking inside of 30 days. You can't wait 10 days to call someone back. You can probably get away with maybe 24 hours, but chances are if they're looking to book something today for Thursday, whoever answers the phone is who's going to get that piece of business. So there needs to, even if you've got to train a desk clerk how to take a meeting room booking, you've got to be able to do that.
Definitely. And while we were talking about looking at it holistically, your team almost has to look at it holistically. So they're the sales team, they're the housekeeping, they're your servers, and they need to be on board to jump in and be able to help out with all of that so that you can get that business, and then whoever's furloughed can come back. So the more we can do, the more we can bring people back to work. So I would like to pivot to something a little controversy Bob stirred up on LinkedIn last week.
Go, Bob.
So Bill Gates predicted that 50% of business travel will decline in a post-COVID era. So what are your thoughts on this position, and what should hotels do to plan for the future? Bob, we'll kick it off with you since you kind of started this ruckus.
Sure. Well, I know Bill Gates is a hot topic this year anyway. So, but I saw he posted, business travel is going to decline significantly. I believe he said 50% forever. And I had to say something. And, I think he is really, really intelligent, and he's probably done a lot of amazing things for people. And, but, I just looked at sort of some first principles on this of like, if you look back at the hotel industry, I read about the Spanish flu, and I was really intrigued because I was also reading Conrad Hilton's book, Be My Guest, the story of Hilton. And he started it right at the end of the Spanish flu. So Hilton was born from the Spanish flu, which is wild to me. First hotel was in Texas, right? Then expand. So everything we know about that part of the industry happened since the last pandemic. And so I think probably if you went back to that time, there'd be a lot of people saying, travel's not a good thing. The world has changed forever, but people are pretty resilient. I think it will be different. I think it will be rough for a little while, but hopefully the worst is behind us. And look, I think like being in sales myself for a long time, I'd done some medical sales, some things like that. Big deals are made in person. The really big ones always are. You have to have lunch with someone or play golf or do something. They have to like entrust you for you to close that. Yes, little transactional business can be done over Zoom, and probably more is being done over Zoom for the big stuff too. But I just think, look, people also like to travel, right? It's fun to go do it. And as much as we're making budget cuts right now and saying go on Zoom, I think, some of these things we've sort of always known. We do it because we like it, but it also works. So why not love what you do and make some money at it? I don't think it's all just about a spreadsheet and numbers sometimes. But I think that the funny thing is actually the numbers work when you do that fun stuff. So there's nothing wrong with it. So I just, respectfully disagreed with Bill. Got a lot of comments, which was interesting. But, I think this bleisure is really interesting too. I know for me, I'm like daydreaming about bleisure every day. Like how can I do a big deal with a hotel chain in, the Southern US and spend some time in Florida or Texas or something like that, right? So I think Bill is probably wrong, but I'm interested to hear what you think, Kristi and Amy.
Well, with all due respect to Bill, I disagree. I've mentioned that we did this meeting planner poll, and 54% said that not traveling was having a negative impact on the general health of their client's business. And 65% said it was negatively impacting financial growth. And those are two numbers that dispute everything that he's saying. Travel is going to come back. It's probably going to come back a little bit different. We're going to see that bleisure line blurred a little bit more, but it is necessary to move forward. You've already got a couple of the Fortune 500 companies that have lifted their travel bans very quietly, and they're letting their people safely get back into the field. But the reality of it is Zoom fatigue is a real thing, y'all. How many Zoom happy hours did you attend? Because we all thought we were going home for 2 weeks and it was going to be good, and we're going to watch all of Netflix and drink all the wine. And 9 months later, I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not attending that. I don't do Zoom happy hours. I drink at home by myself, like God intended. So I think that's how things are going to get back. People are going to go travel. You saw it over the summer with leisure travel in destinations like Norfolk, Virginia, that were running 90% occupancy on weekends because people just wanted to go somewhere. And it's going to say the same thing is going to happen, but it'll be a want, Bob's point, that people take jobs sometimes just for the travel, but for business, we're going to need to do it. So that's my opinion.
I agree with you guys. I'm on the same page. I think we can be biased, but looking at the data and speaking directly with companies and customers. I just posted something recently as well, not a formal research by any means, but we're talking to companies all the time, former road warriors and leaders inside companies, specifically in the small and mid-sized company space, that are saying, yeah, sure, they're going to look at their trips with a little bit more scrutiny. They're going to probably be longer stays and fewer trips for a while because they want to maximize the opportunity of the travel. And so when it comes to business travel, not necessarily the meeting side, that's what we're seeing is, fewer trips, but longer stays, the face-to-face, the one night overnight can probably be handled via a Zoom. But I agree with you, Bob. The big deals happen in person. We're a testament to that at GitGo. We've won big deals because we committed to going and meeting with the client face-to-face where some of our competitors didn't. So, that's just our personal example. But I really think that we're going to see that. We've also talked to the road warriors that we're having conversations with, and their leaders are saying that leisure is a thing. They want, now that we've had this space, right, there's a lot of different ways we're educating our children, and we're seeing that, maybe there's some more innovative ideas out there. They want their families with them. If they're going to go somewhere new, they want to have that experience for themselves and their families. So how can they combine those? And we're seeing that specifically, like I said, we talk with a lot of small and mid-sized companies, and that's the great feedback we're getting. Plus, we're seeing it. So we've been seeing bookings and travel from the very start of the pandemic. We've put out reports on how much business we've booked for our clients over this period of time, and they're still getting out there and traveling now. Yes, it's less, but in the future, we see companies really eager and excited and currently going under the radar. So the one thing I wanted to mention is check your other codes in your hotel, talk to the guests, because they may just not be booking their corporate travel rates. Obviously, there's probably lower rates out there, but we're seeing some of that kind of sneaky under the radar, getting past maybe some of that travel shame a little bit. And so pay attention to the guests in-house that are coming in right now.
Amy, that's a great point. Me and my wife, I know we were feeling like we can't go anywhere, we can't do anything. And then I looked up the news and I saw, or the public health release, and it said, you can actually go to these areas in the province. You're totally allowed. Just wear your mask. And I was like, oh, we can get in the car and go somewhere and that's okay. I feel like every hotel should know those rules and put it front and center on social media, email, let people know what they're allowed to do.
Yeah.
Because they might really want to be going and they're just feeling like, I can't. And so I think the hotel needs to be that resource.
There were some hotels in Bend, Oregon that did a bike and brew package over the summer. And so basically you rented your hotel room, you got a rental on like 2 bikes, and then you could bike to the brewery. So everything was outdoor, and they were doing their tastings outdoors at the brewery. And they booked all kinds of business because it's the same thing that you were talking about. Someone that just wanted, I need to be outside of the confines of my house for a night. And my husband, so we live here in the Dallas, Texas area in Arlington. He had a family from Mansfield that at least twice a month would come check into his hotel on the weekend with the kids so the kids could go play by the pool. And that's all they did. The parents sat out by the pool. They drank beer. The kids swam in the pool. They ordered DoorDash, probably just like they were doing at home, but it was not inside their house. And the kids thought it was a little adventure for them. So, it was like, if you could bottle that, man, imagine the occupancy you could run.
Definitely. And I think we saw a lot of that in British Columbia is a pretty nature part of the country. So we saw a lot of travel increase just within our own province. We weren't allowed to cross boundaries, but I know the Okanagan Valley, which is wine country, saw that some of their highest rates during the summer just because people had nothing else to do but travel within our borders. So yeah, it was really interesting to see. So we'll jump into the Q&A portion. So there is a little Q&A box that you can click on and write your questions in. While we wait for a few more to come in, I did want to ask one question. So what have you seen in hospitality these past 9 months that has really jumped out to you? So Bob, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so the word resiliency came to mind. I just felt like this industry has never experienced anything like this. I always think of that Arnie Sorensen clip where he talks about World War II and the Great Depression and this was worse. And I like, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, like this is,
We don't know.
Yeah, this is going to be rough. But you know, it's been surprising. Like I would have thought, you know, even from our own customer base, things would have been a lot worse than they were. People got through this thing. You know, some people didn't, and they were hit and there was nothing they could do. And like that was part of the reality. But there was a lot of people where there wasn't obvious things they could immediately do, but they kind of dug deep and found them, and they survived the year and were able to keep people on. So I thought that was amazing. And then just watching some of the brands come together. I mean, people are divided on brands right now, but I did think it was really cool watching their leadership, you know, rally for government funding across competing companies. You see panels with different, you know, Best Western CEO, Choice CEO, Hilton, all together. That was really neat to see, and working to get things done at the governmental level, get support in for laid off workers, and then just innovation, right? So I saw rooms sold as co-working space, so you could get out of the house hourly even, or, you know, for half a day. I saw a monthly L&R subscription where you basically could pay in advance, and you get the pool, you get the gym, you get a few meals, you get your room, but you have to subscribe for, you know, a few months and pay up front. So it was just neat to see innovation and resiliency. And I think they say like tough times breed tough people. And I definitely saw that. And it was impressive and it was inspiring, and it made me want to think outside the box. So it was neat to be a part of, as much as it was tough, right? There was some silver lining to it, I think.
And Amy, what have you seen in the last 9 months that surprised you?
I don't know if it's necessarily surprised me, but something that's really stood out is having a lot of conversations with different companies who had plans to make some changes to their sales organization structure and how they were operating. This gave them permission to accelerate those plans. So they may have been trying to, like, you know, piece it in, make sure there was lots of buy-in and everybody was comfortable with it. Well, this just totally cleared the space for them and gave them permission to make the needed change. And, you know, some of those companies we're talking to, and we've been really honored to help them kind of ideate and think through some of those structure changes as they apply to COVID. But I really love it because I'm a quick start. I'm somebody, you know, kind of that entrepreneurial mindset who, you know, what do they always say? Never let a crisis pass you by or whatever, take advantage. And I think that we needed to do that in some areas in the industry. And so, you know, it gave us that chance. And I always look at it from a lens of opportunity and possibility. So I'm really pleased to see that, and I hope that it continues. So I think there's a lot more to be done and more opportunity in the new year.
Definitely. And then Kristi, how about you?
So I'm going to be possibly the negative Nelly in this. I'm going to prefer to look at it that I am the kind but gentle mother who's now going to chastise the industry. What still surprises me is that as an industry, we still have not learned that discounting does not work. This was a different thing. This, you know, not the president, not that, but fear is what was driving this. Fear and governmental regulations that prevented travel in some instances. You can't overcome fear with a discount. And on the odd off chance that you can't pick up enough occupancy to offset the discount that you would have had to apply to get there. So, you know, I'm still seeing 30% off last year's rates. And maybe last year is not where we need to be benchmarking. Maybe we need to go back 5 or 10 years, because last year was a stellar year. We sold more rooms at higher rates than we ever have in the known history of hospitality. But even at a 30%, even if we say that we were inflated, a 15% discount is too much. And it's going to take us longer to recover. I get that there are people out in the market that are doing it and you feel like you have to respond. But when 90% of the business is being booked inside of 30 days, and most of that comes within 72 hours, why are you managing rates 9 to 10 months into the future? Because when group starts to come back, and it is, your group rate, transient rate informs group rate informs transient rate. You've got low transient rates out there 9 months from now. You're going to have low group rates 18 months from now, and that's going to piggyback itself. You're going to be 5 years to recover to this. Resist the siren's urge to get out there and discount, because it doesn't drive business, and all you're doing is a big giant race to the bottom. And I feel like, and I know this is awful, I've been saying this literally for 15 years. You can go back and listen to webinars that I used to do with John Hack when I was at Travel Click, and we said it all the time. And it's a little disheartening that we still as an industry have not learned that lesson. And I know there are leaders that were out there the last economic downturn and the one before that, and we haven't learned it.
Spoken like a true revenue manager.
I'm off my soapbox now, I promise.
That's great.
So we do have a few questions. This one's for Kristi in particular. So when you were talking about the increase in the market for Q2 and Q3, was that specific to the US market, or was that including Canada?
I don't honestly know. I can find that out. So Catherine, if you would private message me what your email address is, I'll send that over to you, because I'll have to go find the document, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. But I want to say it's usually when they send me those numbers, it's North America. But I don't specifically remember it. I'm trying to see if I can find it really, really quickly.
Okay.
It is just US. I'm sorry. It is US numbers. I found the article really quickly.
Okay, cool. And then from Christopher, so this could be for all three of you. So what do you think will be the recovery timeframe of the tour and travel business? Traditionally travel via motor coach and doubles to quad occupancy. So Kristi, we'll kick it off to you.
I will jump in because I made the face. I think that's going to be the way of cruise ships. Because while I think nothing of hopping on a plane and going somewhere, now in fairness, I should add, I wouldn't have done this before COVID. So that might have something to do with it. I'm not hopping on a bus with 45 other people that I don't know, where I'm going to be driving for 6 or 7 hours at a stretch. That's just a little too close quarters for me. But in fairness, I wouldn't have done it before COVID either. But I think that's going to be like the cruise business. That's going to be tough to come back from.
Okay. And Amy or Bob, do you have any comments on this? Okay, cool.
I would agree. I think that one's going to be tough until people get comfortable being in groups and tight quarters.
So I do have a bit of a different opinion on this one, just because I was on and I don't know what led me to it, but I was on a travel company website where they do bus tours basically. And I was looking, and one of the things they had all their safety measures. And so you had to have the negative COVID test. They had less people on it. You had to wear your mask the whole time. There was quite a few different things, and they were booking. So to me, that shows there's going to be something happening. It was probably going to be way lower, but I think there will be some business, and it will sort of slowly creep back, right? But it's going to be much, much lower than in the past.
Well, I mean, there are people still booking cruises.
Yeah.
That is true.
So, someone will do it. I just don't think you're going to get, I mean, I worked in Southern Louisiana. We probably did 200, 300 tour buses a year. Mm-hmm. And I don't think those volumes will come back anytime soon.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think if you're comparing volume, it's going to be tough to meet where we were, but like is in anything, there's some creative opportunity for those companies as well to look at smaller groups, to look at, a different type of emerging market for themselves, I'm sure.
Totally. And then from Betsy, she's wondering, what innovative ways are there to focus on local area travel as opposed to BT or group? While so many families are looking for small getaways, how can a hotel best target that audience?
So
I'll jump. There's a lot of ways.
Go, Amy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is you need to have a really good partnership with your CVB, because they aren't booking groups for you right now, but you're still paying them some tax dollars. So they should be doing something from drip campaigns with with digital marketing to try to attract what's in that 4 to 5 hour drive market, to attract those people. As awful as it might seem to say, some type of print advertising may even be the case. But you probably need to have something in your destination that is going to be an impetus for someone to travel to. Because while I'm anxious to go most anywhere, I'm probably not going to go to podunk nowhere and sit in my hotel room, because I could stay in Dallas and sit in a hotel room. So just think about that. What attractions do you have? Maybe even partner with those attractions to try to drive some kind of digital marketing to people in that 4 or 5 hour drive range.
Awesome. And Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I think that and then from the property level, doing creative things. We've seen hotels that have had packages for game night type activities for families, especially in the winter. In the summer, we saw a lot of leisure travel going to destinations where they could do outdoor activity. So, I mean, I'm up in the north in Nebraska, and so there's not a whole lot of outdoor activity to be had. However, indoor pools and water parks and, game activities that just the family nucleus can participate in are all great. Like right now we have Christmas light shows, so you can drive through, you pay for your car to drive through, and then there's maps of all the different great neighborhoods. So if you can package things for families to have like a staycation in your hotel and then give them those guides, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can take advantage of what's happening in your market. Even if there's little happening, create the happening.
Right.
And then go from there.
And I'll go old school on this. If anyone gets the Val Pack, and this may be a US thing, but we get these little flyers in the mail. It's an envelope full of, different coupons from local businesses. Many, many years ago, when I actually worked in Buffalo, New York, the city that I lived in was a suburb. It was where parents had retired to. So their kids were elsewhere, but the kids came home, parents had downsized, didn't have place for the kids to really stay. So every year for Christmas and Thanksgiving, we actually did a coupon for, I don't know, it was like a $79 rate, and we would be your kid's bedroom. It was the special. And one of our hotels had an indoor swimming pool. So there was, all that. We actually filled, and I didn't know this when we first ran the campaign. It was 2 side-by-side hotels, and the GMs of the 2 hotels basically had cut a deal that they would close one hotel over each of the holidays, and they never told anyone at corporate. Well, we didn't do it, and we filled both hotels. And Friday after Thanksgiving, the GM and I get a phone call about, oh my God, how is the Comfort Inn sold out? And we're like, well, we ran this thing. We think we're just so happy with ourselves because we've run this campaign. It was tremendously successful. And then come to find out the hotel had been closed all these years. So any sales, and if they had sales, they weren't like closing it in the CRS. If something booked, they would just walk them over to the Best Western. But there are great ways to do that, to get that staycation. And I flip through it. I mean, 90% of it goes into the garbage can, but there's the pizza place that has great deals that we love. And then there's the garage door opening. And I swear to God, every time I throw that stupid garage door coupon in the mail, something breaks on one of our garage doors. So just out of, good karma, it goes into the folder on the side of the fridge.
And then this one's an interesting one. And Bob, I'd love your insight on this. So any suggestions on how to get motivated again? So Elizabeth's in California and they're just getting hit with lockdown. So it's tough and discouraging. So what kind of tips do you have to keep the motivation up?
The best thing I ever heard about motivation was the 3 Ps of motivation. So it's permanent, personal, and pervasive. If you believe a problem is those 3 things, apparently psychologically you will not act, right? So saying permanent, like, oh, it's never going to change, and personal, and it's why is this happening to me, and pervasive, it's everywhere, right? So I think it's about looking for little data points that break you out of that mentally. And when things are tough, I don't try to change everything in my own life at once. Like, from a sales point of view, if I was really low on my number years ago, I wouldn't try to get my number. I would just try to find a small way to improve in a short amount of time, right? So what can I do in the next 30 days that I can control? Well, I could do this many activities very easily. Okay, let's start with that. and drill it back down to today. So I just try to break it down, starting with the big piece, and then just find ways to challenge that. And it is a lie that it's permanent, pervasive, and personal, right? COVID, it wasn't made because of you, and it's not going to be forever. And there are hotels booking business, and there's parts of the world that are getting better all the time. So I think it's a very natural human reaction. I do it all the time too. It gets me down. I get not motivated. But I think if you can find those little wins and those little data pieces and just reset your expectations a little bit, but not for the long run. For the long run, you could be more excited than ever. But for the short run, is Q1 going to be back to normal? Probably if you're hoping it will, and it's not, you're going to be really depressed.
Yeah, you're going to be
right?
disappointed.
Mm-hmm. And then Q2 is probably not, but by the end of the year, are we going to see things slowly sort of returning? Probably, right? We might be at 70, 80% of what it was by Q4. Maybe you want to stretch that out a bit, and then think about the little things you can do in the meantime. Like maybe your hotel literally can't get any business. You could still develop a sales strategy and write it down. You could still think about your marketing and take some courses. So there's always something you could do. And I would like to, encourage everyone to try to think of what those are and just do some small action.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then the last question before we wrap up is from Andrea, and this one's for Kristi. She missed the explanation of why we shouldn't be using 2019's rates as a benchmark.
So 2019 was a stellar year. I mean, we had 5 years in a row going back to let me do the math here, 2014, where every year we sold more rooms than we did the prior year and our rate grew, and it was just this continuous build. That's an unrealistic number to think that we're going to bounce back from a disruptor like COVID and immediately go back to that number. So it's creating that false sense of negativism that you just probably don't need. So, what was that number before we had this explosive growth? Maybe that's going back to 2014 or 2013. Can't go all the way back to 2008 because that was right before the last crash. And that was caused by something entirely different. But finding what that metric is, because we didn't get to 2019 numbers overnight. It took us 10 years to get there. I don't think it's going to take us 10 years to get back to 2019 numbers. I just don't think that we're going to do that next year. So find where that happy medium is. Where was that sweet spot where you thought, you know what, this is probably right where we are. Most hotels had already hit sort of a maximum capacity because the nights they were selling out on were the only nights that they could sell out on. So they really couldn't get better from an occupancy perspective unless they suddenly found that magical Aladdin's lamp that said, fill me up on Sundays and Fridays, fill me up on Sundays and Fridays, or Sundays and Thursdays for me, most of my hotels. There just aren't magical fairy pieces of business that come in on Sunday and check out on Friday. So you always had those gaps. So going back and analyzing across that to say, where was that space where I still had room to grow and I probably wasn't at my max capacity? And that's where we need to benchmark.
Perfect. Great advice. And then as we wrap up, I would love to just hear sort of almost like your rose and your thorn. So one thing you've learned and one thing you're predicting for 2021. That's weird to say. Kristi, we'll start with you.
So 2021 is going to be better than you think. Q1 is going to be a little bit soft, but I do believe that Q2 will pick up dramatically, and the back half of the year is going to be pretty nice. I mean, we're going to have favorable comps, but I think if you find where that magical sweet spot that you should have been comparing to, and maybe not 2019 is not the year, we're still going to have a good back half of the year. But those hotels who've laid that groundwork, they've got the relationships with key accounts, they've got relationships with local people, and they've sort of pivoted where they need to and look at pieces of business that maybe they wouldn't have looked at. Those are the hotels that are going to benefit the most, and they're going to come out of the box hot.
Perfect. And what about you, Amy?
I think sales organizations are going to be lean and mean for a while. As a necessity. But I've also seen, and I'm really hopeful for more of this, there's a rebirth in meaningful, authentic movement to building a stronger sales culture. And I'm talking to more and more hotel owners that are really getting this. This allowed them some space to really think about what they had been tolerating and what they will no longer tolerate moving forward. That doesn't go just for the hotel owners, but sales leaders that I'm talking to. And so they're really looking for ways to evaluate the strengths of their team, to put the right people in the right seats, and to start fresh with a really strong, amazing culture so that this lean and mean team can be really effective and successful. And they're just going to need to be ready, because I agree. I think 2021 is going to be better than what a lot of people expect, and we're going to see progress throughout the year.
Awesome. I love that. And what about you, Bob? We'll end off with you.
Sure. So digital prospecting, I think, right? We're going to see a lot of innovation on team, and we're going to see a lot of innovation on technology. And technology can be different tools to get data on who prospects are and how do you reach out, but it can also be social media and how you build your list and how you build contact. I was going to say, I met Kristi and Amy by following them on LinkedIn, and I really felt like I knew them by following them, right? So it's interesting, and here we are, right? So I think there are new ways to get to know each other. As much as I'm all about the in-person, I think, like, look, tech can help you get there, right, faster, and that's how I would look at it. And then with your team too, I think, yes, you can be lean and mean. You can hire part-time, you can hire full-time, you can hire people from maybe outside the hotel sales industry. You can also get people that you never could have got before within our industry because they've been laid off and there's a lot of people looking for work. You can outsource your team. You can outsource parts of the team. So there's just a bunch of different ways to do it. And I think finding what's right for your budget and your goals, but digital prospecting is going to be the name of the game.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you three for joining us today. This was a great webinar, and it was a perfect one to end the year off with. Thank you, everyone who's attended. We will send out a recording tomorrow, as I've mentioned before. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email and I'll shoot it to the appropriate person. Thank you, and happy holidays and happy New Year, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great New Year.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.